Tinder date turned stalker. Back in 2019, I, 18 female, decided to download Tinder a few months after a rough breakup. I was very inexperienced with dating and pretty shy, so it seemed unlikely that I would meet a potential partner in person. Anyway, after a few matches that led to nothing, I came across the profile of someone that I found very attractive, 21 male. We matched, exchanged Snapchats, and continued to set up a date. Our first date was relatively normal/enjoyable. We saw a movie, and by the end of it, I felt like we hit it off. However, our relationship was extremely short-lived. Not long after I had agreed to be his girlfriend, after about a month of going out, he began to behave very erratically and would sometimes fall completely silent in the middle of conversation, ignoring me when I tried to ask him what was wrong. He became hot-tempered, slamming doors and speeding on the road when he was mad. I started to feel really uncomfortable about our relationship. This went on for about a few weeks until one night, when we were on our way to have dinner downtown, he fell silent mid-conversation. I became extremely anxious as he pulled into a nearby parking garage, wondering what I had done to upset him. As we parked, I decided to ask him what was wrong. He did not answer. When I asked him again, he shouted at me to shut the fuck up. I was completely frozen for a moment, but I finally got up the courage to tell him we were done, gather my belongings from the car, and walk over to the nearest coffee shop to call an Uber. It was fairly late at night, so I walked as fast as I could, hoping he wouldn't follow me. When I made it to the shop, I noticed I had several missed calls from him. When I made it home that night, I blocked him on all social media and decided to never contact him again. I'm fairly familiar with the dynamic of toxic relationships, and I knew that if he could talk to me that way, completely unprompted, it was likely that he was capable of much more. About a week goes by as I start to settle my emotions a bit. I decide to confide in a friend who had never met the guy about what happened, feeling completely embarrassed. A few nights later, I received a text from the same friend. It was a screenshot of an Instagram DM from someone she didn't follow, my now ex. It said something to the effect of, "Hey, I'm sorry we're having to meet like this, but redacted is ignoring me, and I need to talk to her." My heart sunk. I decided to message all of my friends separately and let them know what happened, just in case. Later that week, I started receiving several DMs from various accounts, all without profile pictures or posts. Eventually, I gave in and responded to one, asserting that the relationship was over and that I didn't want to hear from him again. I blocked the accounts immediately afterwards. As time went on without hearing a word in weeks, I figured I had reached the end of the situation. Until, one morning while I walked to my car, I noticed something dangling around the handle of my car door. It was a necklace I gave him. He had only picked me up once from my house before. The thought of him driving to my house, about a half hour from his place, earlier that night freaked me out. I was shaken up for a while. It was by no means an expensive necklace, and I had the exact same one, but I kept it pushing. I thought maybe it was his way of acknowledging that we were done. 2 months later, I was working my job at a small boutique near my house. I was used to answering the phone several times a day, so when the phone rang, I thought nothing of it. But when I picked up, I immediately recognized his voice. He started rambling about wanting a sweatshirt back, but I hung up before he could finish. That was the last time I would ever tell someone I was dating where I worked. I was completely losing it at this point, especially considering he had never called me at work while we were together. I didn't even know how he knew that I was working that time. I told my older sister the situation, and she, being very protective, decided to message him herself. She told him to leave me alone and even offered to give him back the sweatshirt for me. He refused and insisted on meeting up with me in person to get it. When it became abundantly clear that he didn't actually want the sweatshirt back, she threatened him with a PPO, to which he never responded. That was the last time I heard from him. My worst Tinder experience: she wanted to meet me alone, on the beach, no one else around. Definitely a good sign. Tinder was supposed to be a wonderland of discreet, anonymous fun that awaited me after an extremely painful divorce. Instead, I found the opportunity to churn through more rejections in an hour that I could hope to tally after a year of social events and bar crawls. Then Tabby swiped right. I couldn't believe it at first. Cute, funny, employed, capable of driving herself. Pretty much everything that I was looking for in a Tinder match. And I won't lie, I have the same needs that everyone else with the app has. So she wanted to meet me on the sand at Hollywood Beach near Ventura, alone, far from prying eyes. It was the perfect match. Of course, I thought it was too good to be true at first. I was mostly convinced that she wouldn't be there when I showed up. So when I followed her cryptic instructions to take a specific path between two houses, following a beeline to the water, I expected to find nothing. With my phone flashlight bobbing in front of me, I was quickly surrounded by darkness. There's about 200 yards of sand between the houses and the water, so I soon felt like I was lost in the middle of a desert. No house lights were on nearby. I was entirely alone. I was just about ready to turn around, and then I saw her. She was lying face up in the sand. Tabby? She didn't say anything, but I knew it had to be her. No one else was within screaming distance. So I aimed my flashlight at her and walked straight forward so that I wouldn't surprise or scare her. Bizarrely enough, she remained lying down until I was standing right beside. Hi? I glanced down and smiled. She looked as good as her picture and better, which shocked me. She had on a red dress, which was splayed in the sand, that looked ready for a night out. Tabby was gazing up at the stars in an unblinking stare, but she reached for me and beckoned with a wag of her finger. I sat in the cold sand next to her, setting my phone down to allow just enough illumination so that we weren't completely blind. I hesitated for a moment before taking her hand in mine. She squeezed my fingers playfully before running her nails up my forearm, leaving a trail of goosebumps in her wake. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. I hadn't had an intimate connection that left me truly happy in longer than I could remember. I didn't know why she just wanted silent touching, but decided not to question her motives. So I reached forward to stroke her cheek in the semi-darkness. Unlike her arm, Tabby's cheek was lukewarm. Her head turned away from me as I grazed it, continuing to rotate as she broke contact with my fingers. With a sound like pulling a shoe from a puddle of syrup on a wooden floor, Tabby's head twisted away from her neck and rolled onto the sand. There was just enough light to see the squishy viscera in her ravaged stump. I froze. For a moment, I could only sense the crashing of distant waves, cold sand beneath me, and Tabby's dead head. Movie deaths are always profound and dramatic. I didn't know how to process the fact that a human body can break with all the everydayness of a cracking egg. Then I noticed that her hand was gripping my arm. I stared in abject horror as her fingers continued to creep upward, despite her lack of a head. Her other arm reached forward to join it. In fact, Tabby's entire body was squirming toward me. The sand beneath her neck moved, and everything made horrifying sense. Somebody was wearing Tabby's clothes. They had cut off her head, lay down on the beach, then buried their own head in the sand, placing her decapitated appendage above their own. I would have recognized it immediately in the daylight, but the darkness had hidden just enough. They wrapped both hands around my elbow and sat up as a cascade of sand rained down from an obscured face. I saw dark eyes looking back at me before pure instinct took over. I grabbed a fistful of sand with my other arm and threw it at those eyes. With an unnatural hiss, the grip on my elbow loosened just slightly, and that was enough. I yanked my arm away, scrambled to my feet, and raced into the darkness. Panicked blur settled gradually back into cognitive stability. I could have been running for 19 hours or 13 seconds. I truly don't know. Of course, I hadn't wasted time grabbing my phone, especially since the bright flashlight was still on and would have made it impossible for me to hide. As a result, in the pitch black of the beach, there was no way to find my car, and in my sheer terror, I had no idea where I ended up. I found myself on a dark highway with no street lamps and no idea what direction I needed to go. I felt ready to scream. Had the entire world disappeared? Where were all the motorists? Almost as if in answer to my prayer, twin lights flashed far down the road. Adrenaline joy raced through me as I ran toward the lights, my shoes slapping against the ground as I sprinted forward. The car forced itself to a screeching halt just before slamming into me. I must have scared the shit out of the driver, but I didn't care. I raced to the passenger side window. It opened an inch. "Can I help you?" came a timid voice from inside. "Yes," I responded, almost laughing with relief. "I was attacked on the beach and lost my phone. Could you call the police and help me find my car?" The kindness of strangers really is the best of things. I reflected on this as we moved back down the highway, my tension finally melting. Shit, I must have looked terrible. I looked into the rearview mirror to check. Dark eyes looked back at me from the rear seat of the car. They were bloodshot, as though someone had just thrown sand in them. I spun around, convincing myself that it was all in my head, that I would find the seat empty. Someone wearing Tabby's red dress was lying in the back seat. I jumped out of the moving car just as a familiar hand reached for me. Yes, it hurt worse than anything I'd ever felt to hit the pavement at 30 miles an hour, but it didn't kill me, which was the only thing I needed to keep going. Fortunately, we'd already almost made it back to my car. I raced, or hobbled in great pain, if I'm being honest, to my door. I jumped in, slammed on the ignition, and ripped out of there as fast as I could. I don't know how I made it home safely, because I spent more time checking the back seat than I did with my eyes on the road. My horror only increased as I realized that I must have been texting this psychopath the entire time that Tabby was so intent on meeting me. How much did they know about my life? Of course, I typed all of this up to let you know as soon as I could, but I don't know if I'm safe. I think I just saw a red dress moving outside my window. I will never use dating apps again. Everyone feels lonely sometimes. For me, last night struck a little harder than usual. I'm not sure why it did, but it led to me downloading Tinder. When irrational thoughts get to you, you start to think of irrational solutions to your problem. I figured I would get on Tinder and swipe the night away, as it seemed like the easiest fix for my problem. I have always believed that dating apps aren't made to pair you with a potential lover, but rather to make you feel insecure, so you spend more time on the app. Because of this, I was surprised to find a girl called Jessica had liked me back within 10 minutes of me using the app. I felt like she was fake at first, but I'd rather find out than contemplate about the possibility, so I texted her. She responded within a few minutes, and we started talking. What felt like minutes of talking had turned into hours. When I looked at the time, I was surprised to see that it was 1 a.m., so I told her that I had to sleep because I had to wake up early for work in the morning, but that I'd love to text with her again. She replied, "Oh yeah, no problem. If you give me your phone number, we can get off this app." Without hesitation, I gave her my phone number and went to sleep. I woke up and started the day as I usually do. I ate breakfast, took a shower, brushed my teeth, and got on my way to work. I have worked for a newspaper for over 5 years, where I get to write about all types of things. Today, I had to write about a man who went missing not too far from where I live. He was 2 years younger than me and lived alone. It's been 2 weeks since his disappearance, and the local authorities decided to use the newspaper in hopes someone would have more information. As I was finishing up the story about the missing person, I got a text message from the girl. She asked me how work was and if I had anything to do that evening. I caught myself smiling at the text message and ridiculed myself for already being head over heels for this girl, despite not having met her in person. I always tend to get attached to people too quickly, which is usually why my relationships don't go as I would like them to. Because of this, I cursed my mind for feeling this way. I waited a few minutes before answering her text, because I felt like it would make me seem more mysterious and busier than I actually am. I'm not sure why, but I figured it would be better than replying within 5 seconds. "Yeah, I'm free. Getting off from work soon. What do you have in mind? I sent the message and went back to finish the news article. Once I had finished it, I sent it to my boss for confirmation and left work for the day. When I looked at my phone, she replied to my message. How about you come over to my place in an hour? We can chat and have some fun. Without hesitation, I quickly opened the chat and replied, completely disregarding my previous strategy. That sounds great. I'll be on my way soon. A few minutes after that, she sent me her address, which was not far from where I lived. It's about a 15-minute walk. As I made my way to her house, I was imagining all the possible situations that might occur, any conversations we might have, and what the best responses would be. I arrived at her house 10 minutes earlier than she said, but being early is usually considered a good thing. I knocked on the door of her house and waited for a little bit, but got no response. I grabbed my phone and told her I was at her house. While waiting for a response, I decided to look around the house to see if maybe I could see her through one of the windows. I made my way to the back of her house and quickly found myself standing in the garden. Standing in the garden, I immediately noticed something odd. It seemed like she had done some digging a few days ago. I figured she had tiles in her garden which she decided to remove. Before I had the chance to think about it any longer, I heard her voice yell at me from a window above me. Oh, hey, you're already here. Let me open the door. I waved at her awkwardly and was startled by her sudden appearance. I quickly regained my composure and made my way back to the front door, where I was met with her beautiful smile and a gesture for me to come in. You want something to drink? She asked. Some water would be great, thanks, I replied awkwardly. I forgot how shy I can get around people when it's not over text. It's a whole different experience for me. I could tell she picked up on it, and she was amazing when it came to talking to people, because she managed to make me feel at ease quickly. She handed me my drink, and we started talking like we had the night before, the only difference being that this was face to face. After talking for a bit, I asked her if I could use the bathroom. There's one right down the hall, she said, pointing to the general direction. I stood up and made my way to where she was pointing. The bathroom seemed to have been recently cleaned, and the smell of bleach was more than noticeable. But other than bleach, I could also smell something else, something rotten. I made my way back to the living room and said, Hey, I think some animal might have died near your bathroom. As I turned the corner and looked at where I last saw her, I was met with nothing. I also did not get a response, so I called out her name. Jessica? There was a brief pause, but then she replied, I'm in the kitchen making snacks. Something about the way she said it made me feel uneasy. I can't explain why, but perhaps it's because of all the stories I've heard online about this type of thing. I slowly made my way to the kitchen, peeking my head around the corner, and what I saw left me stunned. She had smeared blood under her eyes and was holding a kitchen knife in her right hand. Though I felt unable to process the situation I found myself in, my flight or fight instinct kicked in, and I ran to the front door to open it, only to find it locked. What's the matter? I thought you wanted to have fun, she said in a playful voice. In a frenzy, I ran upstairs and desperately tried to open any of the windows, only to find out she had locked all of them. I heard her make her way upstairs, giggling and singing. I cursed myself for being so careless. I should have known better to meet in a public place. I tried to think of any way to get out of this situation, which was when I realized the window she had yelled through might still be open. Maybe I could use that window to get out. I quickly ran to the side of the house where the window was to push my luck. To my surprise, the window opened, and I saw my chance to escape. I could hear her yelling, "No!" as she was inches away and running towards me. Realizing I had no time to hesitate, I jumped out of the window and landed on my back. Though the fall was painful, I was still able to get myself on my feet. I ran to her neighbor's house and frantically knocked on the door. An older couple opened the door and seemed rightfully confused by my frantic look, but realized I needed help, so they let me in. They allowed me to use their phone to call the police and offered me a cup of tea to recover from what had happened, which I explained to them. This when the pain in my back started to become worse, as the adrenaline in my body was slowly becoming less and less. Within 10 minutes, I heard police cars outside. One of the policemen knocked on the door and asked me what had exactly happened. While I was explaining to him everything that had happened, the other cops kicked the door in after Jessica did not open the door. A few minutes later, the cops came out of the house with her laptop, a blood-filled bottle, and a cup of fingernails. The only thing that seemed to be missing was Jessica. She probably left as soon as she realized I would call the cops. I got the medical attention I needed and was offered a drive back to my house by one of the policemen. I was completely exhausted and fell asleep within a few minutes. I took some days off from work to recover from what had happened because I felt like I needed some rest. A couple of days later, I learned that Jessica had been part of an online cult which seemed to worship Satan. I had also found out that I wasn't her first victim. The man I had written about in the newspapers, who had gone missing, had been found buried in her garden. After some DNA tests, they confirmed that the blood and fingernails they found were his. I have deleted Tinder since then and decided to never download it again. There's still no information about where Jessica is, but I'm glad I never gave her my address. Crazy Tinder pedophile. I've read a lot of these let's not meet encounters, but I've never actually had one of my own to share until last month. For background, I'm an 18-year-old female in my first semester of college. I've always seemed to get a lot of attention from guys and tend to attract some pretty creepy ones for some reason. Probably because I am overly nice and have a hard time just telling people to fuck off, even when I get bad vibes from them. Anyway, I decided to get Tinder over the summer due to quarantine. All of my classes for college are online, so I'm not able to meet many people. I thought if I got Tinder, I could get to know some people from my university and maybe even go on some dates. I got a lot of matches. Some guys were really nice and cool to talk to, and then I obviously got some people just wanting to hook up, which I'm not into, but nothing too abnormal. That's what Tinder is mainly for, after all. After a few months, I ended up matching with a guy from out of state. We matched because he was in the area for work. He was 8 years older than me, but I didn't mind. First red flag right there. He seemed pretty nice, and he asked for my snap, so I gave it to him. We talked a little, and within a couple days, he became very clingy and obsessive. I have an extremely busy major, and most of my time is taken up from school. Because of this, I am not always on my phone and cannot answer messages right away. If I didn't answer for an hour or two, he would message me again and again. He said things like, "Why won't you talk to me? Are you seeing someone else? I wouldn't be surprised. You're so beautiful and I need you." I thought this was very strange as I just started talking to him, and we clearly weren't seeing each other. I explained to him that I am very busy with school and it was nothing personal. He said he respected that, and we continued talking. Obviously, that didn't last very long, or I wouldn't be writing this story. He continued to text me constantly telling me he needed me and asking why I was ignoring him. He started talking about driving 2 hours to see me. I was weirded out, but I assumed that he was just lonely and desperate. I felt bad, so I tried to brush it off and answer when I could, because he didn't really do anything too concerning. Stupid, I know. This continued for a few weeks, and I started to get extremely annoyed. I had a bad gut feeling about this guy. He started talking sexual, and I told him I wasn't into that. He apologized and said he would stop. He didn't, no surprise there. So I started ignoring his messages. He apologized and I called him out for it. He continuously apologized and I left him on red. He started Snapchatting me pictures and constantly messaging me, so I unadded him. Then he texted me with another apology and said he hoped that he could take me on that date we talked about, even though I never expressed interest in going on a date. I ignored that message too and moved on with my life. About 2 weeks later, I got a message that simply said, "I'm sorry." I ignored that too. He didn't message me after that, and it soon slipped my mind once again. Later that week, I had a dream about him breaking into my house and attempting to kidnap me. I started thinking about it again, So I tried looking him up on Instagram. He didn't have an Instagram, which I didn't think was too weird because I know some people who only use Facebook, so I tried looking him up on there. He didn't have Facebook either. Now that was weird. Most people have one or the other, if not both. I thought it was so strange that this guy didn't have any form of social media besides Snapchat and Tinder. I wondered if he used a fake name. Then I decided to try one last thing. I searched his name on Google. What I found made my blood run cold. The first thing that came up was an article for his arrest back in January with his mugshot. He was arrested for child pornography. They found several photos of an underage girl on his phone. He was released on bail a few days later. I was absolutely disgusted. This man was a predator, and he was free to do as he pleased and prey on younger girls. When I think about it, my guess is that he saw I was 18 and thought he could still get something from a younger girl without getting in trouble, because I am legally an adult. I'm not stupid enough to send any revealing photos or videos. I am so glad I stopped being so nice and listened to my gut when things progressed. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't, and I wonder if my dream was a sign for me to look into who he was. It still creeps me out that he was so obsessed with me when I didn't talk to him for very long at all. So to the creepy Tinder dude that preys on underage girls, fuck off and let's not meet. A Tinder experience I won't soon forget. I can honestly say the last few days have been the most fucked up, confusing, and terrifying of my entire life. Apologies in advance for dropping this all here, but I just need to write this down somewhere to try and make sense of everything that's happened. I've spent the past few days with nobody believing me, staring at me like I'm less than nothing. I hope that someone here can see truth in my story. I guess I should just be happy that I'm free to tell this story for the time being. When my parents arrived and posted my bail, I saw salvation in their eyes. My sanity was at least partly restored. But when I frantically tried to explain to them what had happened, I soon watched that salvation turn to doubt. God, how could this happen? What the fuck did I do to deserve this? Anyway, the story. I set out on Thursday morning to go and meet up with this girl. Wait a second, let me start from the beginning. I need to give you proper context. A couple weeks ago, I matched with a pretty hot girl on Tinder. Her name was Sarah. She was 23, just a couple years younger than me, and she had grown up in this town just like me. I was certain I had seen her around a few times. She was the kind of person you've been in the presence of a few times, but never properly connected with, if you know what I mean. We started chatting and things were going great. We swapped stories about the town, big events that happened growing up, and laughed about how we'd basically lived the same life, but never actually met each other. She was sweet, she made me laugh, and she was very pretty. I was captivated. This went on for about a week. I'd find myself increasingly excited to see her replies to my messages. When my phone buzzed, I hoped it was her, and it usually was, which felt great. I didn't want to hang around and let this opportunity pass. I asked her if she wanted to meet up sometime soon. She eagerly accepted and suggested Thursday, which I was all too happy to agree to. We talked over what we wanted to do, maybe get dinner, see a movie or something, but she worked nights, so it was going to have to be a day date. I think my heart almost stopped completely when she suggested just meeting and hanging out at her apartment. I was prepared to play the long game on this one, but I certainly wasn't complaining that it was shaping up to be more of a sprint to the finish. She gave me her address, and we laughed about how it was in such a rundown part of town. I playfully hounded her over it, which she laughed off, asking in turn how classy my living arrangements were as a single 20-something working a part-time retail job. She had me there. I don't think I could have brought her here. The place is a dump. Thursday rolled around quickly. I cleaned myself up, put on some of my nicer clothes, and left the house. I felt incredible. I had a spring in my step and a condom in my pocket. If only I could have seen then where this day would go, I might have had the sense to stay home. I rounded the corner to her apartment block and stared up in grim fascination. This place looked terrible. It was like a caricature of urban decay, a relic of a bygone time that the years had not treated well. I laughed to myself, in the relief that she lived on the ground floor. I wasn't going to have to venture into the belly of this beast. I made my way over to her door, apartment 12. I stifled myself, took a deep breath, and knocked on the door. No answer. I double-checked the number and knocked again. Nothing. I walked around to the side window, peered through the bars to see if I could see her inside, but I could barely make out anything. The room looked nearly empty. I tried the door once more, but still no answer. I heard a shuffling inside and the faint sound of a door closing. This must be her. She's coming to let me in now. Nothing. Curiosity got the better of me and I tried the door, yelling her name as I did. It's unlocked and I let myself in, but nobody replies to my calls. The place is horrendous. A wrecked open space punctuated by a couple of pieces of smashed furniture and trash. Something was wrong here. I should have run. Compelled by my curiosity, I continued to venture through the awful place, calling Sarah's name as I went. I checked the first couple of rooms in the hallway and found nothing, but my heart sank as I walked into what I assume was the kitchen area. That's where I saw her. She was laid out on the floor like a rag doll, her bright summer dress standing out in stark contrast against her dank surroundings. My instincts kicked in, and I ran over to her in an attempt to help. I cradled her lifeless body in a panic as I tried to work out what the fuck was going on. Her neck was bruised like she'd been strangled, but she was still warm, color fading from her face with each passing moment. I had no idea what to do. I started frantically yelling for help, but there were no replies. I took a deep breath, collected myself, and pulled out my phone to call 911. The second my hand clutched onto my phone, I felt it vibrate in my hand. New Tinder message from Sarah. I opened it without hesitation. I'm so happy you found me. I felt faint. I felt ill. What in the fuck was going on here? Before I had time to wrap my head around any of the myriad fucked up things about this situation, I heard a sound that chilled me to my core. Her phone vibrated in her purse. I pulled it out, hoping that it might offer me some answers. There it was on the screen. New Tinder message from Rob. I'm so happy I found you. I couldn't suppress the need to vomit any longer. My body gave in and I collapsed onto the floor. When I pulled myself together, I started to scroll through the Tinder conversation on her phone. It was nearly identical to the one on mine. Nearly. Minor details changed, roles were reversed in the conversation. On her phone, I had asked her to meet me here. Before I even had time to try and figure out what had happened or calculate how monumentally fucked I was, the sirens rolled in. Pretty soon, I was cuffed up in the back of a cruiser. Since then, I've been protesting my innocence so hard that I've not even had time to process what happened. I've not slept a wink, and with each passing hour, my pleas for understanding began to sound more and more like the ramblings of a madman. I'm being recalled for further questioning tomorrow. I am certain this is where my life ends.